Africa. So we are joined live in a log cabin in Virginia by Michael Brown. So he is a conservation ecologist whose conservation work is run jointly through the Giraffe Conservation Foundation and the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. And today he's going to talk to us about giraffe conservation in Uganda and across East Africa. Some really, really cool stuff. It's our first ever giraffe session. So I'm really excited about this. You guys seem to be too. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Thank you so much for joining us, and you can take it away.
Awesome. Hi, can everyone hear me fine?
We're great, yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction, Jesse. I'm really, really excited to be here with you all today to share some of the work we've been doing studying giraffe and working to conserve giraffe across East Africa and Africa as a continent. Now, as Jesse just mentioned, I'm Michael Brown. I'm a conservation ecologist, and I work with an organization called the Giraffe Conservation Foundation and an organization called the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. Now, some of you guys might be asking yourself right now, what exactly is a conservation ecologist? So what I do is use science to try to understand how animals interact with their environment, and then use that understanding to help people who live in those areas protect those animals. I work a lot of times over in East Africa, and if you look behind me right now, you might not guess that I'm in East Africa, and you'd be correct. Right now, I am in, as Jesse mentioned, my log cabin in Virginia. Some of you guys are just up the road in West Virginia. If any of you have been to Shenandoah National Park, it's just like 200 meters in that direction. So it's a really pretty place. I do a lot of traveling for my job, which means I spend a lot of time all over Africa and a lot of time here in the States working with some really smart scientists to try to figure out the best ways to protect these animals. So this is what I look like when I'm here in Virginia, but when I'm over in Africa, let me see if I can share this. This is what I look like. So this is me studying some giraffe over in Uganda. So I've been spending probably like the last 5 years of my life or so working with giraffes and trying to understand giraffes and their environment so we can better protect them. Now I am fascinated with giraffe. I'm guessing that you guys are all fascinated with giraffe too. And this is a pretty common thing. So people have been fascinated with giraffe for thousands of years. This is a picture of some rock art I took in Namibia, and you can see there's what appears to be lions, there's some zebras up there, and here on the left is a really big giraffe. And what's cool about this rock art is it's over 1,000 years old. So people have been really fascinated with giraffes for over thousands of years, and looking at them, it's really not hard to figure out why. Some of you guys may have seen them on TV. Some of you guys may have seen them in zoos, but they're always really interesting and they're always really captivating. And one of the first things that really catches your eye when you look at a giraffe is just how big they are. So giraffes are the tallest animals on the planet, with males getting up to 17.5 feet. For the Canadians, that's 5.3 meters. And females, 14 feet, roughly 4.3 meters, with the largest giraffe ever on record being over 19 feet tall. So they're enormously big animals. That's so tall. By comparison, we have a little person who's about the size of me standing right next to a male giraffe here. You can see how much taller they are. Now, giraffes are also extremely heavy, with males on average weighing around 2,600 pounds, which is roughly 1,200 kilograms. Females a little bit less, 1,800 pounds. But the heaviest giraffe ever was over 4,200 pounds. And by comparison, that's like a Ford F-150 pickup truck they weigh. So they're really big, really heavy animals. And one of the most interesting things, one of the things that sticks out the most is their long neck. So giraffes have this really long neck, unlike any other animal out there. But what's cool about the neck is it has 7 vertebrae, 7 bones in the neck, which is the same number of bones that you or I have in the neck. So giraffes' necks are really long, but they have the same number of bones. And then if you look at that neck, you might wonder why they have such a long neck when there's so many other animals out there that don't. So what about giraffe makes them so unique that they need this long neck? One of it is access to food. So giraffes live in places where there's lots of other animals out there, and they're all kind of competing for very similar food items in the environment. So by being able to reach higher things, giraffe can get access to food that other animals don't. Another reason that scientists have suspected that giraffes may have long neck is vigilance. So what vigilance means is giraffes live in environment, they live in places where there's things out there that want to eat them. Things like lions, things like hyenas, things like leopards that might be able to eat them or eat their babies. And being able to look out over a savanna and see things coming at you from a long distance is really helpful. And one of the other reasons people think giraffes might have long necks is fighting among males. So giraffe males, the boys, fight each other sometimes to gain access to certain resources. And they do this in a really interesting way that not a lot of animals do. And I'll share a video with you in just a second. But to give you a bit of comparison at how different male and female giraffe sizes are, here's a picture I took of some giraffe in Uganda. A big male, fully grown adult male on the left, and a fully grown adult female on the right. And you can see that even when they're fully grown, males are very, very big. And you can see here, this is a video I took of some giraffes in Uganda. And this is how the males actually fight each other. So unlike sheep or deer or moose or elk, where they'll hit each other head on, male giraffes will line up next to each other and they'll swing their long necks and their heavy heads and they'll try to hit each other. And so giraffes with long necks and heavy heads are a little bit better at fighting. And that's one of the reasons scientists think there might be long necks. Now I mentioned foraging as well, what giraffes eat. So giraffes are really cool in that they're what we call browsers. And what a browser is an animal that eats leaves off of trees and shrubs. So to do this, giraffes often eat really spiny, prickly, thorny foods that are like, if you try to rub up against them, they'll cut your skin. But giraffes are really good at taking leaves and seed pods and flowers off of these. And to do this, they use their dexterous lips, and they've got a tongue which is almost 20 inches long that they can use. And it'll stretch out and they can wrap it and use it to manipulate these plants and work around the thorns and spines. So they eat predominantly leaves and shoots and flowers and seeds on trees, because I said they're browsers. Now, if you try to go out there and eat leaves off of trees, you probably wouldn't get the nutrition you need. And that's because you don't have the right stomach. You all don't have the right digestive system. So giraffes are what we call ruminants. They're like goats or cows in that they have a special stomach, a special digestive system that allows them to break down the leaves that they eat. And to give you an idea of what it looks like when they're using their tongues and their lips to work, this is a giraffe eating a tree called an acacia tree. And what you can see there is got really prickly thorns on it that are hooked. So they stick you really good, but the giraffe are remarkably adept and skilled working around the leaves. And you can see it just using those lips and using that tongue to pick this tiny plant. And we're going to go to another one. This is another better view of a giraffe eating at another plant, looking at using its tongue to manipulate the leaves. Use them up and with special tongue. So giraffes are also really interesting in that they have, they're big animals, but they have a lifespan of about 25 years in the wild, give or take. We don't really know for certain, but we think they live around 25 years. And baby giraffes are really cool too, because when they come out, when they're first born, they may be up to 6 feet tall. That's taller than me on day one. So they're really big animals from the beginning, and they can walk almost immediately. One time I was really lucky to see a giraffe being born, and from the moment it was born until the moment it was up and walking was only 45 minutes, which is really different than people. Giraffe calves stay with their mothers for about 1.5 to 2 years, and then they go off on their own to explore the world and live their life out in the savannas. And what's interesting about giraffe, so some other animals have breeding seasons, so they'll have special times of the year where they'll give birth. Giraffe don't. Giraffe can give birth throughout the year. So anytime you go out into the savannah, anytime you go to these places in Africa where they are, you can probably see baby giraffe if they're out there. So this is a video I took of a giraffe. It's the giraffe I told you that was just being born. And this is the giraffe getting up and taking its first steps, learning how to walk. And so for a 6-foot-tall animal, getting up and learning how to walk quickly is really important because there's things out there that want to eat these people. So learning how to walk quickly is really important for a baby giraffe. And there he is using his wobbly legs to try to lean up against his mom for some extra. So where do giraffe live then? We know a little bit about giraffe. Where can we go and find them? Giraffe in the wild can only be found in Africa. Right now, they're found in 21 different countries throughout Africa. So we, as scientists, we think there's now 4 species of giraffe spread across these 21 different countries in West, Central, East, and Southern Africa. And if you look at this map here, this is a map of Africa with each one of these little polygons, these shapes, representing where we know giraffe to be. Now, if you look at that map, though, you'll see these landscapes that they live in are incredibly diverse. So giraffe live in these amazingly different environments. So this is a picture of a giraffe I took in a desert in a country called Namibia. This is a picture of giraffe I took in a savanna in a country called Uganda. This is some giraffe in another desert. Look at that, there's not even a tree to be seen. And this is in a place called Etosha National Park in Namibia. And conversely, look at this. There's a bunch of trees on this giraffe, on this population of giraffe, also in Uganda. And then here's some giraffe with some zebras in Kenya. And then there's another savanna here with a beautiful lake in northern Tanzania. So you can see giraffe live all over Africa, and they cover these incredibly different habitats, these incredibly different environments. And so if you look at that, you can compare them all next to each other. They're really, really different places. So as a scientist and as a conservationist, it's really interesting to me to try to figure out how giraffes live in these different places. One last thing we know about giraffe, well, we know a lot of other things, but one important thing we know about giraffe is that they're vulnerable. So if you were to go out and count all the giraffe in Africa right now, there'd be about 111,000. So when we get off here today, I'd love for you guys to check out the population of your nearest town and then compare that to how many giraffe are left in the wild. So right now there's roughly 111,000. So again, compare that to how many people live in your town, and you can see that's in the whole continent of Africa. So this population of giraffe has been declining recently too. So as scientists, we're trying to figure out why there's fewer giraffe now than there's been in the past. And we're gonna see if we can change that to make these environments better places for people and giraffe to live together. So I want to talk a little bit about a study that I've been doing and spending the last 5 years. I've been working in a country called Uganda. And if we look at that same map of Africa, Uganda is a country here in East Africa. It's a beautiful place. It's about the size of the state of Oregon, but it has a lot of people in it. So we've been trying to figure out how we can best save giraffes while making sure that the people there can benefit from the presence of giraffe. Now, I said before, but I'll show you in pictures, Uganda is a beautiful place with these incredible animals. We've got lions, we've got potus monkeys, we've got hartebeests. There's these big open landscapes with these enormous animals. There's elephants that go around, and these are animals that you get to see on a daily basis when you're working in some of these national parks. It's amazing to just be driving to work in the morning and you have these elephants that you have to stop because they're crossing the road in front of you. It's so cool. And then there's also these amazing predators, things like lions and hyenas and leopards. So there are these really cool ecosystems where all these animals are living together, and we're trying to figure out this puzzle of how each of these animals interacts with each other. Now, as I mentioned before, there's also a lot of people. So where we work in Uganda, there's people that come up right next to the wildlife. And so that makes an interesting puzzle to try to figure out how people and animals can live alongside each other. Uganda as a country, I said, is about the size of the state of Oregon, but there's more people in Uganda than there are, let's say, in the country of Australia. So there's a lot of people in Uganda, and it's important that we all figure out how people and wildlife can live next to each other. Interesting also, Uganda is a seasonal environment. So if I were to go up to Minnesota or Newfoundland or Ontario right now, I might look outside the window and there'd be snow, but if you go back in June, it's very green and luscious. Uganda's on the equator, so it's slightly different seasons. For them, they have wet seasons and dry seasons. So the wet seasons for them are like in April and August through November, and it just gets really, really rainy. And then the dry seasons, there's almost no rain in it. It dries up very quickly. So the animals have different seasons than the ones that you may be used to in these temperate environments. So the things we do over there when we try to study giraffe, one of the important questions we ask are how many are there? Are their populations growing? So are there more giraffe in these years than there have been in previous years? How do they move? How do they navigate these environments that they live in, especially when the environments change over seasons? You can imagine, like, if I'm a thing that eats leaves and I live in Ontario, it might be easier for me to get food in June or July than it would to get food in January. Giraffes have similar problems in getting food between the wet seasons and the dry seasons. So trying to understand how they move in these seasonally changing environments, what types of habitats do they like, and what do they eat? These are all really important things for us to try to understand how to protect giraffes. So to do this, we have some really cool systems, really cool, interesting fact of giraffes at how. So giraffes are really cool, and they've got these spot patterns on them. And every giraffe has a unique spot pattern. It's like a fingerprint, and we use them like name tags for the giraffes. So we have a special computer program. So I'll go around these national parks and we'll take pictures of giraffes with a digital camera, and then we can put them into our special computer program, and it'll spit out the name of the giraffe. It'll tell us which giraffe this is. And then over years, over months, over years, we can see where these giraffes are moving. We can see if they're staying in the same places, who they're associating with, whether or not they're surviving into the next seasons, and whether or not there's new giraffes coming in. So we can tell them all apart, and we essentially have a name for every giraffe in the country of Uganda, which is really, really cool. We can do that with the technology. So that's helped us to figure out where giraffe are in Uganda, where they're not in Uganda, and how many there are. And that's important for us to figure out how to best protect them. So if we were to take a time machine and go back into the 1950s, we would have found giraffe all over northern Uganda. So this is a map of Uganda. We would have found them all over northern Uganda. But between the 1950s and the 1990s, giraffe all but disappeared from northern Uganda, and then we only found them in these two places that are outlined in black here. And they went from being in the thousands to less than 100 giraffe at one point, which is really dangerous for the giraffe population. What's interesting though is from the mid-1990s until now, the giraffe populations in these two places have grown. So there's more giraffe now than there were 30 years ago. And it's gotten safer for giraffe outside of these areas. So one of the things we were looking to do is maybe to help giraffe in these areas where there's a lot of them to recolonize, so take them from those areas and put them back into places where they once were. So we can do this by knowing how many giraffe are out there. Now, another thing we do with giraffes to try to understand them is we put GPS units on them. So like the GPS units that you might have in your phones or your parents might have in their cars that allow us to track where the giraffe go. And then we can use that to understand what types of places they like and how they move around these environments. So we put these GPS units on these giraffes. We have these little things that we put on their heads. They're about the size of a small phone or a deck of cards, and they talk to my satellites. So I can look at these giraffe. I can pull up on my computer here in Virginia and track where all these giraffe are in Uganda without leaving my desk right now. So this is kind of what it looks like in Uganda is how some of the giraffes move. Each one of those dots represents a different giraffe with a GPS unit on it, and you can see how they're moving in the environment. And then we can use pictures from satellites to try to figure out what about those environments these giraffes like. So where are places that giraffes spend more time and what is going on in those places? And we can find out the key resources, the key things that giraffes need to be happy and healthy. So we use this information to do really cool things. And I mentioned one of them before, and that's to try to take giraffe from places where there's a lot of them to places where they used to be, but were extirpated, were made extinct in the past. So there's places that were once really good giraffe habitat where they were poached out, or for whatever reason, they weren't not there anymore. But we know it's really good giraffe habitat. So we'll take some giraffe from one population where they're doing really, really well and help to move them to this other population so that we can grow giraffe and return them to places where they once were. So to do that, we have to catch giraffe, which is quite an exciting exercise. And this is me right here catching one giraffe in Uganda. And what we do is we'll put them into the back of a truck. So we'll steer them in using some ropes, and we'll put them into a back of a truck like this. And you can see this is a truck full of giraffe that we're moving from one national park in Uganda to another. There they are, their heads are sticking out. And once they get in the truck, they're very relaxed. And then we'll take them. And this is giraffe being released into their new home. Oh, and they kick my camera. And off they run into their new home. So this represents a really cool outcome for some of the science. So using the understanding that we developed from these cool studies where we'll go out and take pictures and identify all the giraffes, and these other cool studies where we'll track them around the environment, and we take the information that we learn from these different scientific studies to find good giraffe habitat and to find healthy populations that we can use to source to take giraffe back to places where they once were and help the population continue to grow. And then we do a lot of other really cool things about giraffe, things that I don't really have time to talk about right now. But if you want to learn more about giraffes and ways you can help, you can check out the Giraffe Conservation Foundation website at www.giraffeconservation.org. And there's a lot of really great information on there for you guys if you want to check it out and learn more about giraffe